Good afternoon, everybody. It's Tom Christie back in the painting studio. It's a beautiful fall day in Nebraska, probably one of the last warmer days we're going to have for a while. But it gets me in the mood to carve. This is going to be session 2 of creating a black cap Chickadee Christmas ornament. Kind of a fun project. And in the previous session, we got the pattern made, and then we got the bird carved. And I show you how to do that. If you haven't seen that, you might want to check it out. In this session, we'll focus on painting the bird. I've never painted one before, but I do have a lot of good reference from my bird feeder digital camera setup. And so these are some images that I've captured from that. The great thing about that is too, they give you 20-second videos, so you can really get all different angles on the bird. It's very helpful for reference. I am not going to worry too much about anatomical precision and accuracy. This is meant to be a Christmas ornament, so I'm not going to go overboard on detail either. Kind of a decorative piece, but I think I'm happy with the way it's turned out so far, and I think it'll look great on the tree. I'll circle back and give you a snapshot of it if I ever get it done on the tree. So let's bring the camera in, take a look at base coating the bird, develop the colors we need, and get this bird painted. Thanks for coming back. Thanks for the feedback, and thanks for humoring me on this project. You know, some of the feedback is I'm a beginner, and something smaller is less intimidating, and I think that's a great point. And the goal is to encourage people to give carving a try. So let's go. Just a quick side note, I had shown you in the previous video how I made this ugly paint handle, but very functional, and you might want to make a better looking paint handle than that. But in that regard, I also needed a stand, and I just used a piece of scrap Tupelo that I had laying around, drilled a 1/2-inch hole in that, and it makes a perfect stand while I'm painting to set the bird aside and let things dry. All right, we're going to use acrylic paints in this project, and I've mixed up a little bit of this undercoat that I use, which is 50% Liquitex heavy body acrylic, burnt umber, 50% Liquitex white gesso to give me this kind of heavy bodied base material. And I am going to put just a little bit of fine texture on the bird, on the feathered areas of the bird. Very fine texture with a little bit of a synthetic sponge. We'll keep the beak nice and smooth, but I think putting a little bit of texture helps in the painting process for some of the techniques that I use. It also creates a little softer look to the feathered areas of the bird, as long as the texture is not too rough. All right, I'm going to use a little 1/2-inch angled brush, and we'll go ahead and make sure I'm in camera angle here. I'm going to go ahead and paint the beak so that it's nice and smooth. And then I'm going to use this material, paint right over the eyes. And since this is such a small bird, I can pretty much coat the entire bird and not worry about it setting up, but I want to keep the texture off the beak. I'll do that much for now. I'm going to put a little material on the palette, use my synthetic sponge, work the material into the sponge so it's embedded in there, and then use that to go over these areas that I've painted and just stipple on a little bit of texture. I'm being careful not to texture the bill, the beak. Keep saying bill, sorry. hopefully you can see that in the camera, just a little bit of texture. It'll give us some softness in the painting process. So I'll go ahead and do the entire bird like that and then come back. Here's just a quick close-up of the textured bird. So hopefully in that light you can see a little bit of fine texture. I'll take a quick look at our reference pictures, and I have more of these. These are the 4 that I'm just going to focus on. And see how many base colors we've got. We've definitely got the dark black, this off-white, so that's 2, this gray on the cape and coming down the sides, 3, then dark on the wings, tail, that's probably a burnt umber, 4, light edging, be like, we'd probably use that off-white. So we've got this peach area, that would be a 5th base color. This peach area goes on the sides, but you can see it fades down, and the breast is kind of off-white under this black patch under the beak. The white kind of goes down, and it looks like from the reference pictures I have, it fades out back here roughly where the legs are, and then this peach rusty color kind of goes under the rump here. Tail feathers underneath, gray with some light edging. This picture was interesting because this bird ducked down under the feeder, but it gave me a great view of the cape and the tertials and the primaries and the tail feathers for our reference. I wanted to show this slow motion video just as a reference point as well. So you can see these tertials are kind of dark on the outer side from the quill, and then a light edging here, and pretty dark in these areas. The primaries are more burnt umber. It's a good shot of, let me stop that and back that up. There's another bird that came in. But I thought this gives us an interesting view of the underside of the bird as it flies away. And you just don't get that type of view that close very often, but a great shot of the tail feathers here, and you can see the colors and some of that light edging that I mentioned. Here's where I was seeing that rust peach color coming back right to the rump, and the white coming down roughly in this area. Pretty light gray underneath all over. But I thought you might want to see that for your own reference. Another bird that came in. Good frontal shot to give us the shapes. Well, that's probably more reference than you want or need, but part of the point I'm trying to make is a big part of the fun for me, especially doing a bird I've never done before, is getting to know the bird. And these type of references are invaluable, and I enjoy discovering the bird and trying to duplicate that with my painting. I'm going to use an X-Acto knife and just carefully remove the paint. You can wait until the end of the painting process to do this, but I like to see the life in the eyes as I'm painting. Kind of goofy, but it helps me stay inspired. And I like to get this base coat off so that when I paint around the eyes, I'm not scratching off any of the finished paint later. Now I've got a chalk pencil to do some layout work, and I've got my pattern here for reference. And it looks like from the photos I have, the black cap kind of fades out into the cape back here, roughly in that position. The black goes right through and under the eye, right up to the beak. And then this white patch, let's see, the gray kind of comes down here. This is the gray area. And then this white patch right in there. This black bib, I'll call it, under here. I'm going to raise that up on this side a little bit to match the other side. And this is why I like the chalk pencil. You can easily make corrections. Again, just under the eye, the black, back to this spot, and then the gray comes down, meets up here. Then under the tail, a little bit of a V shape here. That's about it for layout work. Now we can get our base colors. Right, I'm starting with off-white, and that's a mix of white gesso with a little bit of raw umber in it to make it more of an off-white rather than a bright white. And I'm using a little angle brush here and just kind of softly painting in a first coat, not trying to get strong color yet, but just get the area marked out. And I'm leaving a pretty soft blend on any of the edges where I go to a different color, so we don't have a hard edge of paint there that's impossible to hide later. Right up to the beak here. And then on the breast is off-white here under the black bib, and then goes down roughly, look like from my reference, goes down to about this area where the legs are, and then fades into this peach color under the rump and also on the sides. So this will take a couple of coats, probably 3, and I'll gradually build up the off-white color here, and then I'll come back. For the gray areas, I'm going to paint the entire back gray to begin with, down to the lower edge of the wing feathers here. And I've got Nimbus gray that I've mixed with raw umber to darken that gray and also brown it up a bit and warm it up, so it's not a cold value of gray. I'm going to go ahead and paint the primaries, also the tail feathers, and I've kind of identified where the tail feathers come into the body there, top and bottom, so it matches up with that V down below. Again, this will take a couple of coats, and as I'm getting close to the white, I'm just using the brush to scrub across there lightly without a lot of paint and create a little bit of a blend to begin with between the gray and the white. So I'll get a couple of coats on there. And then come back. Also painting the underside of the tail, that same gray value. And blending that into the side here as it meets the body. All right, for the sides, kind of this champagne color, I'll call it. I've got white gesso and mixed in a touch of yellow oxide and a touch of raw sienna to get this color. And I'm gonna take that right up to this corner. It looks like it comes right up there and then begins to fade into the white breast. So I'm just scrubbing across that area. And then that color goes back under the tail feathers here. And then kind of blends into the white of the belly down here. Still using this little angled brush to give me some control and yet allow me to do some blending rather than with just a detail brush. And this will take several coats to brighten up the color and get a nice blend. So I'll work on that and come back. Now I'm going back with a little off-white on the brush. Not a lot of paint, and just the brush is damp, so I'm scrubbing across the junction there to get a nice blend between the white and that champagne peach color. Get a nice soft transition, and this will take some work to get it the way I want it, but that shows you kind of how I'm using the brush in both directions to create a nice blend there. Now I'm going to use some carbon black for the cap. Same process here. Keep it thin on the junction with the adjacent color. I'm going to paint over that eye again. Make sure I get black all around that eye, including just underneath. And then back here on the cape, I'm just going to do some little feather indications and blend that out so it's nice and soft as it meets the cape there. This will take a couple of coats again. I'm going to go ahead and paint the bill carbon black as well right now. And we'll come back maybe and do a little lightening of that later. And then I'm painting the bib under the chin here with carbon black. And I want to keep the edge soft again. And we'll put some details along the edges here, but start with just a kind of a rough blend. Starting to look like a chickadee. While I have the carbon black on the brush, I'm going to use a detail brush and begin to put a few feather barbs
in here across and into the white. And I'll do the same thing here up into the cap. Pretty meticulous at this small scale. So you need a good sharp brush. And then I'll do the same thing around the bottom of the bib here. I don't know if that's what it's actually called, but it looks like a bib. And then I'll take some of the off-white and go back in the opposite direction. So I'll finish the carbon black up there and then come back. Now I'm going to take some of the off-white color and pull in some feather barbs across the gray. And again, I'll do the same thing in the opposite direction with the gray so that we get a nice soft transition across this area where this white patch kind of tucks into the cape. Going back with the cape gray value and just pull some splits in the feathers back in this direction. Now I've mixed up some Nimbus gray, darkened with burnt umber and carbon black, and I've got a little bit of a scrub brush here, and we want to go in and darken the scapulars and the tertials. We'll leave the cape there light. Right now I'm just getting a kind of a brownish gray, darker value, and putting that on in this area. Also the wing that goes down here and tucks into the side pocket. And it's a little messy right now, but we'll come back and do some shading on these feathers. Right now I just want to get the value darker, and I'll go over this a few times. I'm going to do the same thing with the tail. In the center, and then I'm going to fade that out to a lighter value on the edge and let that light gray remain on the edge for now. So I'm just kind of scrubbing on the darker color, and that texture is pulling that color off the brush. And this will take a couple of coats to get consistency. But you can see I'm just going for a darker value here in these feathers, and leave the cape and these feathers light. I'll keep working this until I get it nice and soft, And then we'll come back and put some edge highlights on all these feathers. I've added more burnt umber to this mix, and I'm going in and with the detail brush and painting in the primaries here, kind of a darker gray brown value, but more brown than these surrounding feathers. With the detail brush, it gives me the opportunity to clean up some of these lines as well. These center tail feathers get pretty dark, almost black, so I've added a little carbon black to that mix and darkened the two center tail feathers. And then they go into the coverts here. Now I've got some off-white, and I just want to outline the edges of these feathers. Easier said than done. We'll get there. Very small work here. And as I pull that forward, I'm lifting up on the brush. And it looked like in the reference, this feather here is a little darker than the others. I'm going to do the same thing on the edges of the tertials here with the off-white. Flip that around and catch the other side here. A little cleanup to do there. And these are a little brighter on the tips, it looks like. I'm going to add one more down here. I'll get the other side done like that, and then we'll do the primaries and the tail feathers. Now I'm using Nimbus Gray to outline the primaries. And those feathers just kind of line up in rows down here on the side of the bird. The combination of the tertials and the primaries. Now I want to work on these tail feather edges. Need a little more water in that mix. I've got the Nimbus Gray here. I'm going to outline each one of these. And I'm sure you can see my hands shaking, such small targets here. My age has nothing to do with it. Right. So I'll just show you enough of this because this will take some time to get these cleaned up. It's pretty meticulous work. As I move to the outer edge, I want to lighten that even a little bit more with the off-white. And put a nice light edge on this outer tail feather. So I'll work all of those for a while, but that gives you enough to kind of the approach. And then I'll come back. Now I'm using this base gray color to pull in some quills. In the tertials, the primaries, and a couple in the tail feathers. There's a small group of feathers looking at the reference coming out from underneath here. And I want to put those in on both sides. They're dark. And a group of about 3 feathers in here. Since this area is so small and those feathers are so small, I just put a couple in, and I'll do the same on this side. Call it good. The underside of the tail feathers, just going to put a few indications in here. And this is with the off-white. Go back in this direction. Just added a few quills to those feathers, and I think that's all I'm going to do on the bottom side here. I've got the original side mix here, and I'm just going to pull a few feather barbs up into the gray just to soften that a bit. I added a little carbon black and burnt umber to this cape color, and I'm just pulling some splits into that area. And I'm using a lighter value than these splits, so I've added more gray back in, and I'm just pulling a few feather flow marks through this gray cape area just to break it up so it's not a solid color, and add some softness there. I'm going to then do a similar thing. I've got bright white gesso, and I'm just going to lace in a few lighter feathers here, kind of keeping in mind feather flow around this white cheek patch. And this will just add a little depth and an indication of feathers here, and kind of pulling right into the cape area. Probably hard to see in the video. I think you can see that. I'm going to do the same thing on the breast. Try to stay in camera. I've got this at 2 times power so that you can see. This stuff is so small, it's hard to get a good shot of it. But I'm just lacing in some lighter ticks here to indicate layered feathers and pulling some of those up into the colored side pocket area. And then with a very fine touch, I'm pulling some of those up into the peach colored area just to break it up a bit and indicate feathers here again. These are kind of angling up. And the same thing back here under the rump. Get it where you can see it. Just kind of some interlocking strokes. And that'll be all the detail we'll need, or that I'm going to put on the body here. I'm going to pull a few gray splits into that tail area. I didn't lie, I'm just kind of making it up as I go, so part of the fun. I've got some gray, kind of the tail value. Need a little more water. Just pulling a few into that area. Like that. I just added a few black feather tips coming out of the bib here and into the white. Just looking at the reference, it looks like there's often that type of transition. Now I've got a little smoked pearl and raw umber mixed, and I'm just going to highlight the sides of the beak here, right along the separation between the upper and lower mandible. Give it a little bit of a highlight, lighten the color just a bit. That's about all we need there. Finish things off, I'm going to take a little carbon black and pull some splits into the tail feathers. And I'll do the same thing up here on these tertials. It's just a look at that, and I'll do that around several of the feathers. I've added a little carbon black and burnt umber to Nimbus Gray. Just pull a few splits into these lighter gray feathers. Like that. Now I've got just a touch of Nimbus Gray with burnt umber on a little scrubber, and I'm just going to scrub in a lighter highlight over the eye and kind of leave the top of the head black. And I'm going to do the same thing under the throat here. I need a little more Nimbus Gray in there. It's a little bit of a highlight that we can use then to pull some carbon black lines through, flow lines, and just kind of similar to what we did on the cheek, just to add a little feather flow detail. So I'm going to go back over that, build it up a little bit until there's a little bit of a highlight there. Same thing back here. So we can pull some black lines through that area. And now I've got carbon black on the detail brush. I'm just going to pull a few flow lines through here, very small. Pretty subtle. Hopefully you can see that. Same thing down here. Some carbon black radiating out. Give this bib a little bit of detail. These lines need to be super thin, especially at this scale. And then kind of wrapping into these feather barbs on the side and on the breast. Used a darker gray value to put a few splits in the underside of the tail feathers. All right, I think we're done. Just give you a 360 view. Just top down. Underside. So I'll just coat this to protect it. It's just another quick top-down view. And I'm going to use Tester's Dull Coat to coat this and seal it up. And then on top of that, a little bit of Krylon matte finish. And then probably put just a little bit of sheen on the beak here. Just a final view with a little bit of Prolux semi-gloss on the bill, just to give it a little bit of a sheen and some life. Now I'll get the belly taken care of. I've got to remove the paint handle, fill that, paint that small spot, and then we'll be ready to hang it.
All right, everybody, that's going to wrap up the black-capped chickadee project Christmas ornament. I'm really happy with the way he turned out. Is he perfect? I'm sure not, especially for very intricate, experienced songbird carvers. But I'm close, and it's a Christmas ornament, and I had fun doing it. And I hope some of what I demonstrated will be helpful to you. I hope you'll tackle one like this. I may try some others. We'll see. Until next time, Tom Christie signing out. I'll circle back closer to Christmas time when I get him hung on the tree and get a good shot of him doing his thing. Until then, Tom Christie, see you later.